So now let's turn our focus to socio-emotional development in early/young adulthood. You'll see, I assume, the blanks below. What ages would they be? I assume this is a very easy question. So if we look at it from the perspective of acknowledging emerging adulthood, Arnett's concept, we'll say ages 25 to 40 or 45. Our focus for the remaining part of the chapter will be socio-emotional development. But let's take a moment and try to think of the other two domains. Hopefully you were thinking physical and intellectual, though if you want to be fancy, say cognitive, all the better. If you're 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, do you feel like you've reached adulthood? You may say no, but if I ask you, do you still feel like you're an adolescent? You would probably say, well, that doesn't feel comfortable either. Well, perhaps you are experiencing the concept of emerging adulthood. Now look at the following figure and look at by age. When people are asked, do you feel that you've reached adulthood? You can see by the earliest years of late adolescence and early adulthood, most people do not indicate a yes. But doing just a little bit of rounding here, by age 30, we're rounding up a little tiny bit, almost 3/4, we'll say a solid yes. But to answer the question at the bottom, does just about everyone think that they have achieved it by age 29? 3/4 of people is not just about everyone, so that would be a solid no. If we rephrase our question to most people, we would find that approximately 2/3 would give a strong yes. So all no, but 2/3 is majority though. Let's now consider the entire span of young adulthood and look at possible milestones. Certainly, not every person experiences each of these milestones. First one, leaving home, moving out from one's parents' house or apartment. Though very commonly, we move back in and move back out, and many times move back in again. Completing one's education, at least perhaps for the time being. Beginning full-time work. Your maybe not forever job, but perhaps a step in the rung of what might be your forever job, if there's even that concept nowadays. Economic independence, being able to pay your own bills, make your own way. Finding a long-term partner, perhaps buying a home or perhaps not, and perhaps starting a family, or again, perhaps not. The timing varies tremendously, as you might know. Most developmental psychology courses will stop and consider briefly some of Levinson's seasons of life. There are dreams that help to guide our decisions. Men and women sometimes have slightly different paths. Men have it more easily possible to focus on their career. Certainly having a family takes time away from this, but it's not typical that a man would stay home for months or years in pursuing child rearing, whereas this is a common choice in women. Women have to split their dreams between career and marriage, often stepping out for a certain amount of time from their career. This is one reason why women typically retire with lower salaries, this stepping out process. Let's now consider religion and spirituality in America, especially compared to our European counterparts. If you look at the information below and shown in green, you'll see to the far right, for the very first one, nearly a flat line indicating very little change between 1999 and 2022. And I think we can say, since it says 47%, I think it's okay, we can say that half of Americans consider themselves to be religious. Now if you look on the line underneath it, also pretty much flat. At a lower level though, coming in at 33%, exactly a third. So a third of Americans identify themselves as spiritual, but not religious. If you're curious in terms of what group of religious group in this country is most rapidly increasing, it would be the Pentecostal Christians, often referred to again as the born-again Christians. Now, in terms of Europeans, are Americans more or less likely to believe in God? Well, we're actually twice as likely to believe in God as our European counterparts. But the belief in God is not the same as belief in religion. Religion's an institution, God is God. In terms of religiosity, how do Americans compare to Europeans? I want to read a quote to you here. The quote says, "Many Western Europeans think of Americans as hopelessly, bafflingly, and dangerously religious." So I'll say it again, hopelessly, bafflingly, and dangerously religious. Many Americans think of Western Europeans as distressingly, inexplicably, and unrelentingly secular. And I'll say that again, distressingly, inexplicably, unrelentingly secular. Consider this quote by famous German sociologist Hans Jost, 2009. He said that it is widely accepted that in the U.S., is far more religious than practically any other comparable European state. So, far more religious. That might surprise you. That's okay. Now let's turn our attention to Erik Erikson's theory. Now, since we've been doing Erik Erikson for every module, in other words, for every age group, be sure for our next test to be able to answer questions about his previous stages. You may well see something on this. But let's focus on the stage associated with young adulthood, intimacy versus isolation. The former term, that is, intimacy, refers to not physical intimacy, but psychological, emotional intimacy, and the ability to make a commitment. This includes especially to one's partner, but intimacy also includes with our friends. The latter term, isolation, will be those people, for whatever reason, are unwilling or unable to form intimate bonds, intimate relationships. Let's be sure to mention the concept of social clock. A social clock perspective sees change as age-related, and what one would expect and what one's society would expect should be attained at given ages. There is a tremendous amount of variability today, which was simply not present in earlier generations. You will decide whether or not you wish to have children. In previous generations, people never questioned it. You will decide whether or not you wish to marry. People in previous generations did not consider this to be an option. So much choice and much variability. Earlier in our culture, a woman not being married by early 20s would be at high risk of being an old maid. 30 years of age or older, no chance at all, she was an old maid. Nowadays, a person can do their first marriage at any age. So much variability. You probably should take a moment and evaluate theories. Modern theories of development recognize far more variability than previous generations. For example, consider Erikson. Many people today engage in intimacy before they engage in the identity stage. And indeed, modern researchers have even questioned the idea of distinct stages altogether. Now let's take a moment to review. distinct stages versus a continuous way of looking at things, would that be looking at continuity and discontinuity, or one or many courses of development? Hopefully, you remember that distinct stages are part of the question of continuity or discontinuity in development. But overall, modern theories have a far greater stress on the interaction that occurs between our biology, our psychological factors, and our environment, specifically the sociocultural environment.
Let's now consider marriage and things related to marriage, starting with cohabitation. Is it an alternative marriage or the stage before marriage? Both. Depends on the person. Do cohabitators divorce more or less than people who jump right into marriage? You might say, trying to use logic, that since they've already taken the relationship through a test drive, it should be less. But actually it's more. Can we say that cohabitation causes an increased divorce rate? No, remember it's a correlational study. We're measuring two variables. There's no treatment being applied. Probably what's going on is the people that are more likely to cohabitate are also the people that are more likely to divorce when things get tough or bad. So correlated, yes. Causing, no. So let's focus on marriage. What is the current average age of marriage? Women slightly younger than men, 27 for women, 29 for men. Being older at marriage is the best single predictor of success. And we're now marrying later. At least 70% of us marry at least once, some more than that. Same-sex marriage is now recognized. Do you know what year that was and what president it was under? I have a picture on the bottom. It's a little bit stretched out to fit the slide. It would have been under President Obama, and it was in 2015. Now, children are now seen as a choice, and being child-free, at least in terms of society's view, is legitimate. Maybe not your parents or grandparents, but for society, yes. Child-free is correlated with higher education in women. We should also say that children are much more likely now to spend time in a single mom-headed house. This has a distinct negative side to it in that somewhere between 25 to 33% of women-headed houses live in poverty, and children that live in poverty experience all the things that go with it. Let's now consider divorce and remarriage. Divorce rate. Do you think it's staying about the same? Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? It is actually decreasing. Today's divorce rate, we've heard 50% for a long time. So if it's decreasing, it should be less than 50%. Yes, indeed it is. 44% is the current rate. But if you just focus on marriages after the first, they are much more likely to dissolve, particularly the third, for whatever reason. Most common time period, within the first 7 years. Divorce after 10 years is apparently very rare. Are couples with children more or less likely to divorce? We all hear the concept of staying together for the children. Maybe there's an attempt to do that for a while, but actually children are a major stressor, and individuals with children are more likely to divorce. Who's most likely to ask for it? The woman? The man? Both partners equally? Apparently, by far, women are more likely to initiate it, and the least common reason is when both couples decide more or less at the same time that that's the way to go. Do most people remarry? Yes, and usually well within 4 years. What is the average age of marriage? 30. By race, who is the most likely and least likely to get divorced. Caucasians, most likely. Asians, the least likely, with a divorce rate less or more than, let's see, less than half of Caucasian people. If you're looking at blended families with one parent bringing in their children to the new relationship, the relationship between the step parent and the child is a huge predictor of marital happiness. If there's strife between these two, that marriage is at risk for failure. If they get on like thick as thieves, if you ever heard that saying, the marriage has something strongly in its favor. So now let's consider the leading causes of divorce. Take a look at the list, identify, if you will, what you believe would be the top two, the bottom two, and the middle three, and which do you think is the leading cause at 75%? So this list is in order, it's just in reverse order. Many people have multiple reasons. Lack of commitment, that was at 75%, significantly above the others. Infidelity, next, over half. Too much arguing and conflict, also over half. Married too young, unrealistic expectations, roughly third-ish. Financial problems, roughly third-ish. Substance issues, roughly third-ish. Domestic violence, 25%. So takeaways, lack of commitment, first one. Infidelity up there, but not the first one. Financial problems, although you suspect it's in the top 7, I'm sure it is. It's closer to the bottom. Domestic violence, although at the bottom, still 25%. Other common reasons would be unequal splitting of household work / inequity, religious differences, also included in the top ones, but not the top 7. Are you a dink? And what does that mean? And do you want to be one? It can either stand for dual or double. Both are correct. So dual or double income. So you're looking at 3 probable, at least potential dink couples there. And the NK, no kids. So double income, no kids. This is intentional. This is a long-term decision. This isn't because they were just married and haven't decided yet. This isn't because they would really like to have kids and there's a fertility issue, but this is a choice